Good morning and welcome back to Margin. This morning we're going to talk about what are assets and liabilities. So let's jump right into it. So for many of us, we have heard the terms assets and liabilities for probably many years, but we may not have known what exactly that means and how it relates to us. But what's important is the fact that assets and liabilities are in all of our personal finances. And so what I want to do is not only define the terms, but also look into why and how they actually affect your personal finances and how you need to actually be mindful of what they are. So simply stated, assets are what you own. So those are the individual items or the things you're invested in that you own. And with that, that's a simple definition of it, but I found a definition that's a little bit more elaborate by the legal dictionary. And so with that, they stated that the term assets refers to things owned by people or entities that have or are expected to have economic value. Assets come in many different forms, including cash, bank accounts, investments, collectible items, personal possessions, and real property. The value of an individual's or entity's assets is offset by the amount of their debts. So speaking of debts, a liability is something that you are liable for, a debt that you owe that offsets the asset that you own. So for example, you may have a home that you own, and with that, you may say, okay, yes, I own that home, it's my asset. But technically, if you have a mortgage on that house, there is a portion of that house that is owed back to the bank in order to pay it off in full. And so you may have a home that's worth $365,000 and you may owe $312,000 on that house. Now that difference between what you have as a value on that house and what you owe on that house is your equity, and that equity is an asset to you. But that doesn't mean that you have the entire amount of that house considered as an asset, because there's part of it that has an underlying loan attached to it. So much like this mortgage or much like that house, many people have a tough time actually defining what they own. Now, there's an author by the name of Robert Kiyosaki who goes into this and actually attributes a home that you live in as a liability, not an asset. And so with that, his explanation of that is the fact that an asset is something that pays you, and your house that you live in, that you're constantly maintaining and investing money into, is not an asset because you're constantly pouring resources into it. Now with that may or may not align with your methodology, but what's important is to figure out what you actually own and what you actually owe on what you own. So when it comes to assets, there are a number of different aspects that you need to factor in. Now, if you're a business owner and you have an inventory, that is considered an asset for your business. Now, if you are an LLC or a sole proprietor that it flows down to you individually, those assets are yours. Those are assets to you. Now, if you own a vehicle that's owned free and clear and you do not have a loan on that vehicle, or maybe you have a loan that's smaller than the actual market value, much like the house analogy, you have a certain amount of equity, and that equity is an asset to you. So you may have a house full of furnishings and you may have $20,000, let's say, in furnishings, but you may have a couch that you still have a loan on of $4,000. And so with that, you technically have the assets of $16,000 instead of $20,000 because of the offsetting debt. Now with that, the other aspects you want to consider is what other assets you own. So you may have precious metals of some kind. You may have Bitcoin. You may have cash. You may have other, assets, other aspects of your portfolio that you want to make sure that you consider. Now, sometimes it's hard to actually define what it is you own, but I would encourage you to go through a process of actually doing an inventory. Kind of like I mentioned with the furnishings in your home, you may actually want to go through the process of saying, I have X amount of furnishings in certain areas of my home, and being able to state the value, being able to have pictures or purchase related documents for those stored in a keepsake place. And that would enable you, in the event of, God forbid, a flood or a fire or something else, some act of God, that you'd be able to pull that up and actually be able to look at an inventory of what you own. Now, that's not excluded only to your house. You may have a vehicle, or you may have, other aspects that you would need to consider as well. But it's important for you to put together an inventory of those things you actually own, so that you have that available. So as I mentioned before, liabilities offset your assets. So when you are looking at a house that has a mortgage, you have the mortgage that offsets the asset of the home. And so when you're looking at liabilities, some examples of that would be an auto loan, would be something like a home loan, or would be some kind of business loan that's attached to you, or something that you are on the line for. And it may not be only a loan, it could be a lease or some other type of obligation, but actually looking at and writing down all of those aspects that you are liable to, those agreements you are liable for, and actually being able to look at, here's everything I own on one side, and here is everything that offsets what I own through a form of a liability on the other side. Now, in the next episode, we're going to go through taking these two figures, the assets and the liabilities, and figuring out how you can then estimate your net worth. And this will be important for you to track on an ongoing basis so that you can see how margin is contributing to reducing your liabilities and increasing your assets. My call to action today comes down to looking at all of your assets and actually writing those down. Now, initially, we're going to want to write these down, and then tomorrow I will show you how to automate this process. But initially, you want to go through everything you own, everything that has market value that you can notate, that you can include in your assets section. So the other aspect is looking at your liabilities, writing down everything you are liable for. Now, this may entail you pulling a credit report and reviewing that to see who you owe what to. But for the most part, you should be able to write down all of those aspects of who you owe money to. And so my call to action today is really to look at those two components so that going into the episode on net worth, you'll have that information to be able to calculate that based off of. If this information is helpful to you, explore the Margin membership, where me and my team will help you take the information you're learning and apply it to your life and your finances. I've built an interactive course that allows me and my team to come alongside people like you to help you revamp your finances and build margin into your life. Click the link in the description below for more information.